All right, welcome back, Athlete Builder. It's Jim and Lucas. We're here in the library. This week, we're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Tom Klootwyk on the show. Tom is a knee guy, and I met him years back. My wife has had 2 knee surgeries that were significant, and Tom did both of them. A little bit about Tom. He's a local kid that grew up in Bloomington, so IU guy the whole way. Grew up there, went to IU medical school. Played ball in high school, basketball, football. Post high school, became more of a runner. From that point, now that he's kind of past that little running season of his life, more into swimming, but always been active. Always have dealt with athletes and specifically knees. 25 years, the head guy with Indiana State's football team. 23 years with the Indianapolis Colts. Has a lot of great stories. We talked last week. We talked a number of times about things. He's done about 4,800 plus ACL reconstructions alone. He does about 150 of those a year. They do about 600 knee surgeries a year. Complete expert in his craft and field. He's on an international board. They meet every 2 years. There's about a third from the North America group, a third from Europe, third from Asia and Australia. It's all about ACLs. He meets every 2 years for that. He's been speaking on the topic for a good long while. He's part of Forte Orthopedics medical group, formerly was Methodist Sports Medicine. So that entire group is a whole staff of doctors and specialists, doctors of physical therapy, athletic trainers. The whole group is outstanding, top-notch, especially Johnny. I'm a big fan of him. So we're going to get into a number of things today, talking about return to play, his history dealing with athletes, a lot of imbalances with student athletes that he's been coming across the last 2-3 decades. But Tom, thanks so much for being on the show today. My wife and I were really excited that you said yes, because we have the utmost respect for you as a professional and your knowledge and your craft and the kind of results that you have. So again, thanks so much for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Tom, just real quick, the obvious question is, if you're going to be a doctor and you're specializing in one thing, and it really is just one thing, you said you don't even do knee replacements, but just knee surgeries otherwise. Why knees? Why not elbows? Why not hips? Why not skin? Why not?
Yeah, great question. So our group is kind of divided into that. We're kind of Noah's Ark. So we have guys that just do shoulders, just do knees, just do foot and ankle, just do elbow, hand, and then the joint replacement guys. I can't really tell you why. I just was attracted to the knee. And I don't know, it just kind of ended up there.
So right from high school, right to college, IU, and then medical school, and just right into knees. For those that don't know, what's that whole process take to get to that specialty where you work on one thing? Because you have your residency.
Right. So you have 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, and then a 5-year residency program. And then I did a year of sports medicine fellowship, and that was here in Indianapolis with Don Shelbourne, John McCarroll, and Art Reddick. And during that, you were exposed to different things, knee, shoulder, upper extremity. But I just gravitated towards the knee during that time frame. So it was really 6 months of specialty knee training, but not replacement work, just sports injury, knee injury. And then I was lucky enough to join that group and stay on, and then get to concentrate my practice in that.
Gotcha. So that takes you to your early 30s, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. 32 when I started in practice. Yep.
Dang. Married, kids along the way?
Married a year after med school. My wife's actually an attorney. She was entering law school, so we graduated at the same time, med school 4, law school 3. 41 years here in June. We'll be married, three daughters, all adult age, 2 married, 1 to be married, 5 grandkids. So all good.
Dang. Boy, checking all the boxes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. So at what point do you think, I'm going to apply for this Colts job or this Indiana State football job and see how that goes? Or they come find you?
Yeah. So, a lot of life is being in the right place at the right time and being a little lucky. And that's what I would say for almost all of that. The Indiana State connection came about because a lot of their athletes were coming over to Indianapolis to be cared for at the group. And as I joined as a young guy, Don Shelburne and John McCarroll said, well, why don't you start going over to Indiana State once a week to see kids instead of having them all come over here? And started working with their training staff. A physician at the time that was taking care of them, Bob Burkle, was very gracious the first year. And then he was at a point in time in life where he was kind of like, why don't you do this? And I'm going to take next Saturday off and go up and see my daughter at Purdue. And Bob never came back. And that's kind of how it ended up. And I was lucky enough to be there as their head orthopedist for 25 years. And then the Colts would be a very similar thing. I started in '99. Art Reddick was named head team physician. And he said, hey, would you like to help me? I said, I really don't want to give up Indiana State. And he said, that's okay. Let's bring in Gary Missamore, who takes care of Butler. So Gary and I split the second spot and helped Art Reddick. And that started in '99, which was a great time to be involved. That was Peyton Manning's second year. We
Right.
went 13-3. Mike Murphy, the linebackers coach, would tell you we have no idea how we're winning this many games because we're not that good. But they were 13-3, and then got beat. I think it was Tennessee, and Eddie George was their featured running back. I think that was who beat us in '99 in the playoffs. But think about it. If you're going to pick a time to be involved with the Indianapolis Colts, it would have been from '99 to about 2010.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And that's right when you're getting started. That's right in your wheelhouse at that point. That's nice.
Yeah.
Any like you see how dry and funny Peyton is on commercials or TV and stuff, and obviously a huge competitor. There's always this discussion between him and Brady, obviously, but for those that don't know, do you have any insights into work ethic of this guy? Because what I hear is it's legendary, and the amount of volume and effort he would put in with the entire team and himself.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I would say he is an unbelievable professional. He always prepared himself. He held himself to a very high standard, and then I think he just went ahead and held everybody else around him to a high standard. So with that, I think he elevated everybody in the locker room. Story that Hunter Smith, not Hunter the punter, but Hunter Smith the trainer, told that the very first day, they'll have rookie camp or whatever, and then they'll have practice with the veterans. And the very first day, the very first person in the locker room ready for practice, Peyton Manning. And then he just had a certain. There was a playoff game once, and I believe it was against Kansas City. And I want to think Romeo Crennel was the defensive coordinator. I may be wrong, but in any way, I talked to him, Peyton, just a little bit about preparing for the game or whatever. This is more casual passing talk before we got started on something else. He says, "Yeah, I've gone back and looked at some of his defensive tapes from like 8 years ago." So he wasn't just looking at the last 8 weeks. He could go back in time to evaluate coaches and their tendencies and players and their tendencies. And yeah. So, and he really does have an incredible sense of humor. Yeah.
So he's looking for trends and insights that he can glean that, hey, this guy has this habit or, like you said, tendency in these situations, or even to the level where you can extrapolate the coach's identity on the defense and offensive coordinators as well. And they say, hey, in this situation, like he just believes in his heart he's going to run the ball, so we have to do this, or he's going to throw, or he's going to be in this formation on defense.
Yeah, I would assume that's the case. We didn't. I tried to stay in my lane, right? The medical
right.
side.
Yep.
But I would assume that that's it. He just wanted to see, was there any type of trend or tendency that he had? What did he do in certain situations? And playing the odds, playing the statistics.
Right.
But yeah, he a great guy. Just a really, I mean, everything that you would want to be true about him is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really represented Indianapolis and the Colts really well, and just a really loyal, just a solid guy.
Yep. Let me ask you this. So if I'm looking at the line, especially the offensive line, but D linemen too, or just different position groups, I'm going to say, well, this group right here, they're more susceptible to having a lot of knee problems, right? So not so much the defensive backs and receivers, but those linemen right from the get-go with that much mass and size and force. Like, even when they're sometimes in high school, they're wearing the braces on their knees from that point on, sometimes even as a preventative measure.
Right.
So is that the group, or those the groups that are most at risk versus other position groups, or how would you rank those?
Well, there certainly are injuries that are at risk for the position.
Sure.
So, and let's talk real quick about braces because you mentioned that. And you'll see some high school kids, you'll see mainly college kids, linemen wearing braces, especially O linemen. That is often, they're often told you're going to wear a brace. And college ball is a little bit different than professional. If you'll look at a college game on Saturday night, and let's say it's a Big Ten or an SEC game, so some of these guys are going to be playing on Sunday. They'll almost all have braces on. And then if you look at a game on Sunday, very few of the offensive or defensive linemen will have braces on. So
Okay.
a lot of the brace data came actually out of Texas that we reviewed, and it's really kind of split, and meaning that there are some articles that would support wearing a brace to prevent a collateral ligament injury, an MCL or a lateral collateral, but most often the MCL. And the MCL is what that offensive lineman's going to be most prone to getting. They're engaged with somebody, they get hit from the side, their foot's planted, and their knee is forced inwardly, which would injure the MCL. So it makes sense. Let's put a brace on them to protect that. About half the studies said, yeah, it did that. About half the studies said, yeah, it did, but we also had an increased incidence of ankle sprains. And
Okay.
that's the other injury that the offensive lineman is really prone to, is a high ankle sprain. Same thing, they're engaged, they go to rotate away from the load they're getting, their foot gets caught, and they get a forced external rotation of that ankle, which causes a high ankle sprain. So from a professional level, we never felt that we could tell an offensive lineman, you have to wear this brace. The professional athlete has a little bit more leeway in what they're going to wear than the collegiate athlete was. Now, that's not for safety. If there's something they need to wear for safety, they're going to wear it. But if it's their choice of wearing a prophylactic brace or not, they typically professionally won't wear it. But in college, they're really not given a
A choice.
The coach
Gotcha.
is going to say, listen, my linemen wear braces.
Gotcha.
That is what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Having grown up in Cleveland, like, I'm a unfortunate Browns fan.
We
So
had a
every
nice
year
year this year.
they had a nice year, yeah. And I always say, hey, this year's our year, knowing it's definitely not our year. But any chance you happen to see, just as an aside, this isn't even in my notes, did you happen to see the Nick Chubb injury on his knee when he got hit against the Steelers? He was planted, and his leg, I think, was extended, and the guy came right at the front of his knee and then bent it backwards.
I think I saw it live, and then I think that if I remember correctly, they did not. They refused, or they did not refuse in the right word. They decided we're not going to show this anymore. It
Yeah,
was so great. Now I'm sure you could find it somewhere online. I didn't, but
sure.
right there are some injuries like that that are just yeah. They just look horrific when they happen. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole Gale Sayers, right? For the Chicago, he got injured. He's done. Joe Theismann for the Redskins, when that bone was sticking out of the lower half of his
Yeah.
leg.
Yeah.
Monday Night Football against the Giants. Sometimes, it is a it is a game of force, and
Right.
sometimes you lose essentially.
Yep.
So one of the main things with the whole premise of the show being called Athlete Builder, we're working with some middle school and junior high, but mostly high school and college athletes, and building them up and getting them to be better so they can perform better. So let's shift gears a little bit and look at those demographics, and then broadly, we'll start there. What trends do you see in different sports, whether it's football, volleyball, soccer, you name it, with trends with the amount of play and injuries with their knees and any correlations or causations, things like that?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say that the biggest difference, I think, over the course of my career, the 30-year career, is that there has seemed to be a emphasis on an athlete, male or female, participating in one sport. And we see that more at the bigger high school level. Dick Delahan, who was at Ben Davis, was one of I never forget, it was early on in my professional career, the 90s. We were doing physicals at Ben Davis, and he was getting on one of his football players because they had decided they were not going to play basketball. So Dick Delahan was a proponent of you play multiple different sports. And we'll still see that at the smaller high school level. The really good athlete will play soccer, football, basketball, volleyball, basketball. They'll run track in the spring or softball, baseball. But at the bigger high schools, what we've seen is it's almost seemed like they get into high school a little bit, and right about that time they pick their sport, whether it's soccer or football or basketball, and then it becomes a year-round activity. So with that, what we see, obviously, as you would suspect, is some overuse, injuries, without a direct correlation, but certainly you can make some indirect correlations. And then as far as specific injuries, I don't think that I can say that the knee injuries occur more because they're just playing one sport, but certainly other injuries can happen, or other areas maybe of their development doesn't get as developed as well as it would have as if they were seeing a broad range of activity throughout the year.
Gotcha. And then neurologically, playing multiple sports, doing different things, it's going to develop those neural pathways a little differently, which makes you simply better as an athlete. And I was reminded of this. I saw this clip yesterday on changing up your routine so you could change different neural pathways. And the example was, like, I'm right-handed. Tonight when you go, or next time you go and brush your teeth, use only your left hand. And I was like, I told Jen this. I'm like, hey, tonight we're gonna brush our teeth with our left hand. And she goes, really? I go, yeah, we're just gonna see how this goes. And I sucked at it. It was absolutely terrible. But I've been using my right hand mostly for almost 50 years. So doing something completely different. So to the point is, when you play a different sport, you get your brain gets a little smarter at being an athlete, is how I watered down the explanation. You find that to be the case?
I'm sorry, that cut out just a bit. You got to hit me with that again.
So when people play multiple sports, neurologically, they improve as an athlete as well.
I think absolutely, no doubt about it. And I also think that maybe you don't. Maybe you're a soccer athlete, but in the winter you play pickup basketball. Maybe you don't play some for the team or something. I think two things out of that. One is, a lot of people listening, or you've had it, your wife, you have a knee procedure, and you see afterwards, a couple weeks, you notice muscle atrophy, and we see that, right? Geez, my quad's smaller. I can't. I got on the leg press, and I can't press as much. Or what? What we also get that we don't see is neural atrophy. The neural system actually atrophies also, and there's Jean-Pierre Maubasser is the head guy at Goodman Campbell, which is a neurosurgical group, and he's had some injuries, and we talked, and we even looked at some things. His son Dylan is going to med school, and looked at a project potentially of looking at neural atrophy with ACL surgery, and it happens. Well, we don't see that, but you can recover from that. But I think you can extrapolate that to different activities. If you don't use something, it goes away. If you use it, it's better developed. I think if you use more, I think having a broad range of workout and being balanced and symmetric is much better than being focused just on one narrow area of strength or one sport.
Right. Right.
And I think it also, there was I don't remember the study. You ever listen to Freakonomics,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
podcast Freakonomics? Okay. So they were looking at how it was kind of like the NFL, and how did people get decided to go in the NFL, or what? And they looked at two groups of kids. Some kids were coached in the sport continuously, and another group were given go play pickup ball. And what they
Mm-hmm.
noted was the kids that played pickup ball actually developed their skill as well. And this isn't against coaches in any way, because there has to be coach and structure. But there's a balance there. They actually developed somewhat better than some of the kids that never got a chance to just go do other things or just play on their own. So I,
Sure.
I think to the point of I think what I would like to make is that I think sometimes we get too structured. And
Sure.
sometimes we need to get unstructured to make sure we're balanced, symmetric, and we're working on different things.
I totally agree with that. The example I give to my kids, and then it's a long one, but what I would say is that a lot of those great mathematicians like Galileo or even Newton with physics, I would say, you and I are for the most part smarter than almost all of them. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, at first only one guy knew some algebra, then some guy evolved that, right? And someone knew some geometry, but then someone else evolved that too. Then it added trigonometry and calculus and tensors and everything else. So at some point you get pretty smart with everybody else and all the information and data that's out there. And then the creativity kicks in because you have all this knowledge, and you sit around and you have some time where you're quiet by yourself. And you're like, well, what if I tried it like this? So to your point about these kids that can go and play by themselves, well, they're taking what they learn, and now they're kind of like trial and error and seeing things how they work for themselves, at whether it's pick up basketball or whatever, trying a new move. I'm like, oh man, I
Yep.
got this new move I've been working on. I'm gonna try this in a game now, and see how this goes, right? And that's absolutely invaluable for you to differentiate yourself as a person in business or as an athlete. That ability to be creative once you're at that high level of knowledge, right? And that's where that comes in with that free play, if you will. What about males versus females? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Susceptibility to knee injuries for student athletes, and the what fors and whys.
Sure. Yeah. So if we talk about ACL injuries, the marquee injury of sports medicine, um, female versus male, matched for sport and hours at risk. So let's say we're both playing Division I soccer. We're both practicing the same number of hours a week. We're both playing the same number of games, etc. Female's going to tear her ACL 3 times more often than the male.
Ooh.
You're right, and there are a couple. There's a lot of proposed theories. There's a couple of things that we do know for sure. One is that the female ACL overall matched size for versus a male. Let's say you have a 5'8", 150-pound female athlete, 5'8", 150-pound male athlete, and you look at their knees. The female, on average, is going to have a smaller ACL than the male. Their notch, or the intercondylar notch, the part of the knee that houses the ACL, is a little more narrow in the female than in the male, and they have a smaller ACL. So that's number one. And Don Shelbourne did a great study. I got to help him with that, but a great study looking at that and showing that. So that's number one. Number two is that the female sees a abnormal force. Let's say she's running down the field. she slips in a dip or steps in a little dip in the field, not expecting an abnormal force, and there's a force of rotation on her knee. So her muscles will react to fire to protect that rotation. The male does the same thing. They both see that abnormal force at the same time. The male will fire his muscles up to full force in a much shorter time frame than the female will. So the female's knee is at a longer time of risk for further deformation or further injury because the muscles don't fire as fast. Not that she's not seeing the force, not that there's something wrong with her, it's just a fact. Ed Boydus from University of Michigan is the one that showed that. There's a difference in the firing. So if you have a smaller ACL, smaller rope, and it becomes exposed to load for a longer time frame, it's going to be more likely to be injured or tear.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Then real quick, then the Q angle, the hips, that impact that as well. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, it certainly can. So you can I'm trying to remember his name. Ty Hopkins, I think, is the guy who did this study. He did it over at University or at Illinois State. And they took freshman volleyball high school athletes and college volleyball athletes, both females, and they dropped them, let's say, from an 18-inch box onto a load plate, and then they videoed how they landed. The college athlete landed like you would expect, controlled, came down, kept their knee in line, didn't fall into a valgus alignment, which would go along with the Q angle or that valgus alignment, that at-risk alignment. And the energy that they put onto the force plate was pretty controlled. The high school player, the exact opposite. Higher impact force and much more tendency to collapse into a valgus alignment, which is felt to be a risk for an ACL injury. So that then would lead into some of the things that I think you're working on, some of the things that we would be working on, which would be let's correct a landing pattern. Let's get to where balanced and symmetric and in control so that we can minimize that happening. We can't prevent it, but we certainly can minimize that load. And then maybe that translates into, well, I didn't get injured.
Sure. You know, you see a lot of coaches, and I've been guilty of this in the past, where you're doing plenty of jumps where you're pushing off the ground and exerting force, but I would neglect the landings where you might start from a 12-inch or an 18 or a 22-inch box and just land in an athletic position. You see a lot of basketball players, a lot of times when they land, they'll land on one foot versus both feet. So you got to practice landing that too. So that's an important part of the training that even done at a small level could make a big impact on preventing those injuries for those athletes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you wanted to, I mean, that gets into kind of a return to play and a return to play assessment where I think that over the last, I would say 5, 7, 10 years, we're better at trying to be, do more of an assessment, be more objective into does the players had an injury, let's say had surgery, recovered, strength is back, but are their mechanics of play, their mechanics of landing and jumping back? So that would be an emphasis of a return to play criteria that we're trying to implement in a more broad manner if we can. But that would be a pretty big difference over the last 7 to 10 years, I think.
Real quick, what are some of the first things you're looking for when building a return to play athlete when it comes to coming off a knee injury? I ask this because I actually have a kid that's just cleared, just got surgery a couple months ago. He's done with his physical therapy, and he's cleared for strength training. But you can see that he lacks, flexion, extension in his knee. Gait is all wrong, and that's something I'm working through with him. What are some of the first things you're looking at to fix?
Yeah, well, you're right on talking about what you're concerned about. So first things first, if he's had surgery, got to get things healed, right?
Right.
Got to control swelling, get that down. Have to restore normal gait pattern, and then have to restore range of motion. Jim, you guys can tell me more than I can about this, but I will tell you that if you don't have good range of motion of a joint, you are not going to adequately restore the strength. So therefore, with a knee, we want to restore range of motion to what is normal for them. Their full hyperextension, their full flexion. We used hopefully an uninjured other knee as the reference. So for that athlete, first things first, sweating down, normal gait, get their motion back. If they're working on strength and they lack 20 degrees of flexion or 5 degrees of extension, they'll never get all their strength back. It's just not going to happen. Once they do get their motion, then it is emphasis on strength early on, non-impact cardiovascular conditioning, bike, elliptical, swimming. Then we introduce some agility activity that involves some field running and movement. Then if their strength comes up further, we can actually get into some running. And then we're looking at their balance, their symmetry. We like to have their strength 90% of operative side versus the non-operative side. And then it kind of can expand from there depending on what they need.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like I feel a little bit more confident after that answer. I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's also hard, there's two things. One, I would think a lot of those athletes, especially at the higher level, they're really itching to get back in the game, right? Put me back on the field now. And at the pros, like I can tell you, like with Jack playing at Ball State at linebacker, there's practices where he's been like, yeah, I don't feel good. I go, yeah, well, I think I got a fever. I'm a little sick today. I go, so what's going to happen? And she goes, nothing. I'm going to suck up and play. I'm not letting, if he's running with the ones, because I'm not letting the two get reps, right? And that's just Ball State. So now you got someone that playing for the Colts, and there's those $1 million contracts, and they're like, yeah, I don't want this guy behind me to get more reps. So there's that fear of losing their job, balanced by the fear that, man, shit, like this knee's blown out. Is this going to be okay? Or is this one even stronger as my good knee now my weak knee? Like, what could go wrong again? Because they have this fear of getting hurt again and being set back again, right? So talk about the psyche and the mental vicious battles they have to go through just to get back in the game.
Right. I mean, a lot of people think, hey, it's super glamorous being a professional athlete. It is hard. And, you talked about your son listen, I'm not going to tell him I don't feel well today. Yeah. That was the early problem, although I didn't deal with it on a personal or individual basis because we had our primary care physicians taking care of that and the neurosurgery staff. But that was the problem with early concussions, right? I got my bell, but I'm not telling anybody. They're going to pull me out of the game. This is a contract year for me. I got to show people what I can do. This is my year to really get myself set financially for the future. So I got to play. There's still some of that, but I do think in my time from 99 until 2 years ago, 22, when I stepped away, I do think it got better. I think that definitely the concussion reporting did because people realize you don't want to mess around with that. And then the second thing would be is that I think that that from a medical staff, athletic training medical staff, what you try to earn the player's confidence so that they trust you to the point where they know that you have their back, you have their best interest in mind. And that's a balance of a team position, right? Your obligation, number one, is to that player and their health. Number two comes to the team. So a lot of people think, oh, well, you're just going to put them back out there because it's better for them. Absolutely not. You do that and you just destroyed your trust in the locker room. Nobody's going to trust you anymore. But what we would try and do is obviously explain the injury to them, earn their trust, and then when they could play with something safely, you can try and play with this. You have to go prove on the practice field that you can do it. And we'll monitor you, but you can play. Or, no, you can't play with this. This is not smart. Not smart for the short term or you for the long term. And if you approach it that way, in the end, I think that you do earn their trust. And I do think they understand in the end. And anyway, I kind of got off on a tangent there. I'm not sure exactly what the
That's all right.
original question was.
But it kind of brought up a good point for something that I've been kind of thinking about. As you've seen in the past couple of years in football, less head injuries, trying to get the head out of the
Right.
trying to get that part out of the game. But now I think you're seeing a lot more lower body injuries, and a lot of that is because of the tackling and how the tackling is structured now. But there's a question that's always being thrown around if you're paying attention to what people are arguing about on social media and Twitter and stuff, and it's the turf versus grass argument. And from my, I was talking to Jim about this earlier, and I don't feel like turf is as bad as what people believe it is. And I don't believe grass is as bad as what people believe it is. I think they're just about as bad as one another. So I was just curious about what your thoughts are on that.
You're right on. So in the NFL, they do an incredible amount of statistical collection analysis, right? So if you follow that sport, New England got in some trouble a few years ago because they supposedly weren't reporting injuries, right?
Or they inflated the balls wrong.
Yeah. So in any event, and then what you remember is that Belichick just said, okay, everybody is either questionable or he put everybody on the same status. Like they're probable, they're questionable, they're doubtful, they're out. So he put everybody on this anyway. So they really do a good job at collecting data. And what you're exactly right. The turf, the latest data that I saw said that the turf does have some increase in some minor injuries, not injuries that necessarily would keep you out from playing or into season, like a burn, like when maybe Jim and I first went on AstroTurf. It was basically like burlap green hard carpet with 1 inch over with a half an inch or a quarter inch pad over asphalt. Yeah. And you people used to get incredible burns with that because it was bad strawberries, etc. So the turf is better than that now, but there'll still be some of that. But there is no proof that like field turf that is very common now at the high school, collegiate, professional level has a higher incidence of significant knee injury than the grass does. The statistics have, and when field turf first came out, there was a little bit of a tendency towards, ooh, maybe this is the case, and it has not panned out.
I remember reading, I can't remember where I saw it or what study it was, but it took every team in the NFL and looked at all of their knee injuries specifically, and they like you just said, they couldn't find any difference between people injuries that were happening on grass or turf.
Right.
It was really split down the middle, and what you saw was it wasn't a lot of the big time players that are, maybe they're not getting as many reps in a practice because they got to play on Saturday or whatever it is, but they're seeing a lot of practice players getting injured, a lot of third string kind of guys, that stuff. And it was happening on turf. It was happening on practice field because every team has a grass field. They have a turf field. And it was just kind of happened sporadic. Like, I don't think there was any kind of evidence when or how it was happening. It was just,
no.
I think it's just an injury that happens.
It is. I don't know. It is right. I think you're exactly right. It is an injury that happens. I'd say the one thing that definitely was seasonal would be hamstring injuries in training camp. Hamstring injuries in training camp. It's just such a spike, and then it goes away. Yeah. It doesn't go away all the way, but it goes down.
Especially, just with my history, my past jobs I've had in college is whenever those training camps start, I don't think there's really any amount of training that you can do up to camp that prepares you for the kind of demand that you're going to go through the entire time of camp, just because it's so ramped up with all kinds of other external factors, adrenaline, camp starting, the season's getting started. And quite honestly, if you're not prepared for that, you're definitely going to have injuries. But I think that there's, in my opinion, there's ways of starting camp to avoid that, but that's kind of a different conversation.
I had a question about that, and then I just non-intelligent theory, armchair quarterback theory. When you're not in camp, like Lucas just said, you're not going to be at that high level of intensity because you're saving your body, and then you go from 0 to 100 in camp. So that high level of sprinting could be a lot more taxing on your hamstring as the rest of your body. And then you add an impact. So you go from no impact, not sprinting as hard as you can, probably that, in the off season that much. And then you add it in there, and then you have a preseason game, and then it's people trying to make the squad. So higher intensity, higher level of risk. When you have someone that hasn't been playing, like in the summer, or you have like a backup quarterback, it seems like whenever the QB1 goes down, QB2 goes down pretty soon after. It seems like they haven't been playing like QB1, so they're not playing at that speed. They don't see all those reps. They're not going to be as quick to assess things. And so they'll probably hold that ball a little bit longer, and then they get wrecked because someone's going to hit them super hard, right? Because they're just not at that level of intensity. It's hard to go from the level that you're at to game day level, right? Is there any type of thought behind that too? Like, hey, Jim, you're not a complete idiot, or, just stick to watching the Browns and shut up, because you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I would never say that.
Because kind person.
But I did not observe that, when we had some quarterbacks obviously go down, but I didn't observe the second. I do think that they always talk about reps in practice, prep reps, game reps. So I think there's probably something to that as far as playing, but I don't know. I can't comment on does it lead to an increased injury risk rate for that QB2.
Gotcha. Or running back number 2. I get that. I'm sitting back there one day. I had this hypothesis, for whatever.
The Lions coach, Dan Campbell, did say in his very, very viral video, you need volume and you need intensity.
Right.
So if they ain't getting it, that's what he said. If they ain't getting it, then so.
Any let's say the garden variety ACL tear takes 9 months, come back ready to play. Do you have any guys where it's like they're like the superhero Wolverine, where they just healed faster and they're just like freaks, where you're like, I cannot believe this guy is doing this quickly, or this other guy isn't doing it so much? Any instances like that you can say, well, here's why?
So there's definitely a variability of return to play. Excuse me. Some of that would be probably genetics. And there are some guys that go back. We had a young man, went back with an ACL this year, basketball. Oh, he was about 3.5 months. Then he went back to some limited minutes and he completed the season. Now he advanced as he went along. He felt great at every visit, looked good, strength was good, numbers looked good, wanted to play, understood the risk, wanted to do it. So you get those outliers, and then you get some kids who you see at 8-9 months, and they've done everything they were supposed to do, and they're just not quite ready yet or there. I think really probably genetics plays in it, right? Some people get done with a test in 30 minutes and get an A, and some people take it for 60 minutes and get an A. And I don't know. I would say with ACL rehab, I think we're very lucky in Central Indiana. I've mentioned his name a couple times, but I would say that that the 3 guys that I did my fellowship with, and Don Shelbourne would have led them, but John McCarroll and Art Reddig, and then Don, who formed the group originally. Those three guys, and Don did a lot of the spearheading of it, but they really advanced ACL rehab. And there were other people around the country, obviously, but we're lucky in Indiana because we had those guys. And Don's spoken on it on a national, international level about quote unquote accelerated rehab. So we all. I mean, you mentioned ACL is going to take you 9 months or 7 months or what. So we focus on a time, but it's really ACL rehab is really more of um, steps that you've got to meet, gates you've got to get through. You got to get healed. Like we talked earlier, you got to get your range of motion back, swelling down. You got to get your strength up. As your strength is coming up, you got to add agility. Then you got to get more strength to add more agility. Now you've got a decent base of agility. Now we're going to do some individual skill work. You're not against anybody, but you're doing individual skill, sport-specific work. And then once you get comfortable with that, we're going to do some testing. And what's your movement screen, your balance, your strength, your confidence look like? You're good on this. Now we're going to introduce a little bit of team drill activity, non-contact. Then we're going to introduce contact activity. And once we get comfortable with contact activity, we're going to go back. So that can occur over 4 or 5 months, 8, 9 months. It just depends on the athlete.
I assume age impacts that as well.
Age?
You're right.
I think age factors in. But to be honest, sometimes the older patient does a little bit better even than the younger patient because they're very motivated to get back and they understand the importance of doing their rehab. Come on, we were all 16 once, and I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Whereas,
more compliant.
Yeah, you're a 56-year-old. You really want to get back to pickleball or tennis or noon basketball or something, and you're like, no, I didn't go through this to not do my rehab. I'm doing this. Yeah.
Right. I remember the first time Jen had her knee done, and you're like, well, what do you want to do? Because, she was in her early 40s. Like, are you sedentary, or, what's the big deal? Because you're going to be fine. I can, to move straight ahead, you're still fine. You're not going to have any problems, even if we don't do the surgery and fix it. And she's like, well, I like to be in shape. I have to work out, but she goes, I really like to hike in Rocky Mountains. So if my knee's not stable going up and down the mountain, then that's not good enough. And I'm young enough, early 40s, where I got a few more decades of this stuff. So fix it. And you're like, cool, got it. All right, let's go. Now, so we talked about the differences, males and females, and a lot of the reasons why injuries occur. Where, selfishly, where Lucas and I come in is where we want to build these athletes to not necessarily bulletproof their bodies, but give them the best shot at not getting hurt. So what are the things you're seeing with males and females? Hey, their quads are too big, or their hamstrings are too small, or glutes, right? Where, hey, I want you guys in these sports to build these athletes up, get these body parts X at this level, right? And then what are you seeing where they're weak, which opens them up and makes them more susceptible to the injuries?
Yeah. So I'd say the two areas that could get the greatest emphasis, and it's hard, but would be the glutes and the core. Okay. Glutes and core. And part of that is age dependent. The younger high school athlete is just, maybe they're just not, their body is not receptive quite enough yet to that strength or that workout. And we've all seen that, right? See a kid leave as a sophomore and they come back to the beginning of their junior year and you're like, who are you? What happened to you? Something switched for them, right? Their body just decided, all right, my composition's such that it's time for me to get going. And we just see it. So I think that's it. That's one part of it. But I think the biggest thing we see would be persistent glute weakness, and then lack of good core control.
Gotcha. And that core control, I tell a lot of folks, we want your core mostly, stable under duress while your appendages are moving. So not a lot of extension and flexion with sit-ups, but keeping your core braced under load, because a lot of times you'll see linemen, their arms are pushed out here, right? Oh, they're shuffling. People are getting hit at a different side. They're not getting in that sit-up position, and they can't do a sit-up. They have to be able to brace and hold themselves under force. And so we try to build them that way so they can handle impact.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, basically the ability, I guess, stability, like
Stability, right?
core stability. Be stable in your core so that if you get a little off balance, you don't necessarily fall down. You've got good stability and you know, we see that in the gifted athlete, that they just have a really good core control, and it shows on the field. And yeah, so this isn't just for them to, like, I mean, yes, I think it could I think being balanced symmetric can help decrease your risk of an injury. So we ought to strive for it. But to be honest, when you're 16 or 17, you often don't think you're going to get injured anyway, right?
Right.
And most of us don't, unless it's happened to us, we don't have a fear of it. But it's going to make them a better athlete. It's going to make them perform better. So it's a bonus for them. Decrease my risk of injury, and oh, by the way, I'm better because of it.
Like there's the volleyball player that jumps and lands and they contort their body in this striking position or blocking. Same thing with basketball, going up for dunks or rebounds, and they get their legs taken out. So they're having to contort their body, and it's their core that's making them move in the air, because there's not a force against the ground they could apply and turn their body. They have to use their core. So when they come down, they want to come down in that athletic position to minimize that pain from the impact, right? So that's what you're talking about with the stability, to be able to handle that kind of duress.
Right. And just what you said too, let's think of a basketball, and it's basketball time right now. And so they think about getting positioned for a rebound and having somebody equal or bigger than you pushing.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a good solid core, you're going to maintain your position. A good base, you're going to maintain your position. So, you know, you think about lifting, you think about, oh, my arms and my chest and my quad and my hamstrings, but don't forget the glutes and the core. And then in the injured athlete, as they recover from knee surgery, we all focus on our quad because we see it atrophy, but we forget we can forget our glute and core. And that if we could, if we can emphasize the strengthening of that along with those other things, I think it does decrease risk of injury, improves performance, and certainly in our recovery, it's better for them.
You know, come April when they have the draft and the Colts get their guys and they get, flown to Indianapolis, like how soon do you guys get your hands on them, running them through functional movement screens and doing an assessment, saying, all right, this is where this guy is having, this guy's great, this guy's not great? Or do you guys already do that before the draft? Like how's that work, or how intense is that piece?
I'm sorry, I lost you again. Come again. Yeah.
Gotcha. So the question was, when the Colts are drafting players, are you guys doing functional movement screens before the draft, or once they get drafted and they're in town, you start running them through all these battery of tests so they can figure out whether they're strong, whether they're weak, what injury potential there could be, so you could address that?
Right. So I think I got the gist of the question. Absolutely. So all the draft picks, when they go through the combine, are looked at from a medical history standpoint. What injuries did they have? Did they recover? What's the current status? What's the risk of being injured again? Okay. Then when they come in, they definitely go through an assessment, functional movement screen, and they're looked at. Do they have a lot of like hip tightness? Do they have a history of hernia sports hernia problems or hip problems? And all those things are then, a plan has come up. Aaron Burrill's the head therapist. Kyle Davis and Dave Hammer do the head training stuff. They're coming up with a plan of, okay, this is what we're going to do for Lucas. This is what he needs. This is what's wrong. This is what he can do better. Lucas, here's your workout plan. It's in conjunction with the weight room staff, but we're going to monitor you in the training room, and this is how we're going to try and minimize you having problems from where you've had problems before. And we're going to try and head off some of these things that are potential problems because of your anatomy.
And
Gotcha.
do you use the traditional FMS screening, the
Yeah.
ASLR, inline lunge, stuff like that?
Yep. So an
Okay.
FMS, and then I don't know if they're doing anything different now, but the movement screen was really important. And then there was some I think they were using some force plate stuff, but to be honest, Lucas, I'm not sure about that. And Jim and I talked a little bit before about the monitoring of their practice data, their their distance at speed, their heart rate, all those kind of things.
Because I think I always think it's interesting because if the Colts are still using the traditional FMS screening, it must still work, right?
Do you remember John Tureen? Do you remember John? Or say, so John was the strength conditioning coach when I first got there. Rich Howell is still there, but it was John and Rich. And John was a big FMS guy. And he could show you that if you had a injured player and they had an FMS of 13 or below, and they went out and played, they had a significantly increase, and I don't remember the percentage it was, but they had a significantly increased risk of having an injury. Now, it may have been a re-injury of what they had. It may have been they had a high ankle sprain and now they pulled a hamstring. And Jim and I talked about the elite athletes are elite copers, right? So these guys are so good that they can sometimes cover up in deficiencies that there's no way the average person could do, but they can because they're just so gifted. So John really brought in the movement screen, to my knowledge, and Aaron Burrell brought in the movement screen, the use of that for cleaning up, balance, symmetry. And those guys would go through that, I think, a couple times a year.
I think that's very interesting because I see a lot of I see a lot of strength coaches kind of say that FMS is outdated, and I couldn't tell whether or not it's right or wrong. But if it's still working and they can predict that kind of stuff, like, but I think what they're getting at is that if you're not using force plates and you're not using all this technology, then you're not getting accurate reads on guys. But if they've been doing it 20 years ago, and you can look at a guy with the score of 13 below, and you can tell whether or not he's going to get injured or not, it still has to work.
Right. We use it in the office all the time. We may use it on somebody who, let's say, has a patellofemoral problem, a kneecap problem. We may use the functional movement screen just to objectify for them that, okay, yeah, you're feeling pain just at your knee, but guess what? Your glute's really weak and your core is not good. And your range of motion is not good. So they go down, and it's often on it would be a me or a middle-aged person or maybe even a 35-year-old. And what they find out is, holy cow, I can't do just that simple movement. It objectifies it for them and then brings to light, okay, I need to rehab my knee, but these other things play a part in that too.
Yep.
Perfect.
The numbers don't tell the whole story, but they don't lie either. And I like the Bill Parcells, you are what the scoreboard says you are.
Yeah.
And if the scoreboard says that, you're at 12, well, the scoreboard says you're probably going to get hurt. And that's the elite copers. What's an example like you came across where I cannot believe this guy is handling this much discomfort and pain, like he's still going? Like maybe they just have higher pain thresholds or they just don't care. But at some point, it's more than that North Dallas 40 movie where they're just getting injections in the knees, right? These people are really having to cope.
Right.
And
yeah, so not getting into any particulars, but I would say Dwight Freeney was one of those guys that you had better have a very good objective reason to keep Dwight off the field. And he incredibly smart guy, really, really smart guy. and he would look at every possible angle, every reasonable and maybe sometimes not illegal in any way, shape, or form, but borderline like, Dwight, we're not really sure that's going to help, but it's not going to hurt me. And I'll do all these other things. So he would do anything he could to be and stay on the field. He was an elite coper. He would have stuff wrong and he would get it rehabbed and work on it through the week and do everything he could every waking minute to get back on the field and play on Sunday. Unbelievable. I mean, just an unbelievable. And his pain threshold was ridiculously high. Anyway, he made it easy to take care of because he was not a complainer, and he would do anything he possibly could within reason, all legal, to get on the field. And he would be an elite coper. Like he would go with stuff, and you'd be going, "There's no way. I don't think he can go this week." And there he is getting 2 sacks on a Sunday afternoon.
He's just elected Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, Tim Grover has these different ways of categorizing athletes, and I do too. And then there's, for me, the low threshold is called the pretenders, those people that aren't really going anywhere. Then there's the college, and then there's the pro athlete. And at the end, I would say that the micro percentage is what I call the statue. And like, what's that mean? Well, they only put so many busts in Canton of people's faces. And with all those under 400 busts or 500 busts total in Canton, there's only one statue out front in front of the whole building. And that's Jim Thorpe. So anybody short of that relentless approach to their entire professional career as an athlete doesn't get there. When you say something like, when you tell me that Dwight Freeney was simply relentless in everything, well, then it gets pretty obvious that he's going to Canton, because that's essentially what it takes, and a little luck, like you said. You have to be great, relentless, and then not have some freak injury and be a little lucky as well. So,
and he had some injuries. So we're not going to go into that, but he got him taken care of. He rehabbed. He just anyway. He was, and then that, like, we went back to the thing, and that was just a really great time, a great opportunity. Bill and Chris Polian and Tom Telesco at the time. I mean, they draft these guys. I mean, just anyway, they had a way of picking these guys, and Freeney was just unbelievably special. Yeah,
that's awesome. How about you, a runner? Usually a lot of knee injuries there or back problems, but you did it for decades, right? Everything good?
Yeah, knees are good. Back's not good, but I'll blame my mom for that. She had a lousy back and had surgeries, and so have I.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but there's no study that says running is bad for your knees. There's no
Okay.
study that says that. But if you have knee problems, running will uncover it.
Yeah, the gait and everything else, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say I lost cartilage in my knee at age 40 because of playing basketball or something like that. I might not be able to run when I'm 50, even though, I ran for 30 years. Well, it wasn't the running, but the running certainly uncovers it. So anyway, yeah,
Gotcha.
I don't, if somebody's able to run and their knees are healthy, I don't tell people not to run. Now,
Sure.
Somebody's got an arthritic knee and they say, well, when I run, boy, my knee always gets sore and swollen and really painful. Well, listen to your knee. Maybe we need to back away from that running and do other things.
Do you get pushback from athletes, like like the non-pro and college athletes, when you say, hey, you really need to strengthen your glutes and your core and everything else around your body, not just being a cardio junkie? You need to actually build some muscle through resistance training. You get much pushback from the general public from that, or no?
I maybe a little bit, but it might be more in non-compliance than actually somebody saying, Doc, I don't believe what you're telling me. And then the other thing I would say is that, the good and the bad of the internet, right? There's a lot of stuff out there, and you know it. There's some stuff out there for what you guys are doing. It's like, oh, no. And then there's a lot of good stuff, right? So I think if we look at we'll call them the recreational athlete, and let's go to somebody who is 40 and above. I think there's a lot of good information, and it's becoming more evident that, okay, guess what? You got to eat right, you got to stretch, you got to stay strong, and you got to be in cardiovascular condition of reasonable, all those things together in balance. So I think most people understand that, and then the athlete that's really doing something that wants to play. I want to keep playing soccer. I want to keep playing pickleball. I play basketball 3 times a week. I want to keep doing it. They're usually pretty motivated to maintain their strength and recover.
Awesome.
So, real quick, I know this is. Are you familiar with knees over toes guy?
I am a little bit, yeah.
I'm just curious about what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good
Well,
question.
I have a lot of patients talk to me about it. I think that if it motivates people to do something and they're not getting hurt doing it, I'm okay with it. But for a question like that, I would defer back to you guys. What do you guys think about it?
I don't like to have that knee so far forward that it puts it more at risk, and then it personally feels painful. I'm always trying to load up their glutes, so a lot of wider squats. It's for my athletes. Usually, it's always a lagging muscle group, so I have them squatting wider as a general rule to build them with a lot of box squatting, then back and then also back squatting. I still need our athletes to front squat and build their quads for that initial burst when they're sprinting, and also I can't neglect that. But I don't see a lot of bang for the buck, and since their glutes and their posterior are so lagging their front side, their anterior, so I don't have them do it that much. Yeah, I don't like it.
I kind of think, if I don't know exactly what he's done, I haven't looked super into detail about what he has done, but I think whatever he has done to be able to allow him to move and function that way, I think that would be beneficial for a lot of athletes and a lot of people. I don't think he's probably going to be the most forceful athlete, when it comes to what your typical athlete needs. I don't think what he does would necessarily benefit all my athletes that I deal with every day. I think there's a lot of components to it that would help an athlete be more malleable and more, more injury resistant. So I just don't know a whole lot about what exactly he goes into, but I'll tell you right now, I would love to be able to bend my knees like that and move. Because that's my biggest issue is my knees. So, so it's I kind of look at it a little bit differently, but I don't know if that's going to benefit your running backs or your 6'7" basketball players, stuff like that. So
I don't know that. I would ask a question to the strength conditioning guys or the therapy conditioning guys regarding
Gotcha.
that. And the people that mention it to me are people like me, recreational people, not people who are seriously into training or certainly anybody that's still competitive.
I know it goes into a lot of detail about like hamstrings and stuff like that and the use of sleds. And I think the use of sleds is for a lot of reasons, I think is great. And how he explains it, I think is great. So I guess I would just have to look more into some of the other stuff. The teacher I used to work with, we used to talk about that knees over toe guy a lot. And some of the stuff, and we've actually practiced and through some of the stuff that he does into our own training. And it's interesting. It's an interesting feeling. My knees definitely, like you said, definitely got exposed. That's for sure. So,
Gotcha. Hey, Doc, I have just got a few more rapid fire questions, so you don't really need to expand on it too much. But what do you like to listen to when you're running or you're working out?
Just music.
Okay.
Just
Any
music.
kind?
Even swimming. I've got some open shot underwater open. They're
Okay.
called open swim.
Okay.
It's an MP3 player that doesn't sit in the air, but right in front. And I just listen to music.
Awesome. What's a bucket list destination you have to go to with your wife that you haven't been there yet?
Yeah, good question. Well, I would say probably on the list top would be we need to get over to Italy. We've done some
Okay.
travel, but we haven't done that. So
Fun. What's number one or a few that are your top favorite sports movies?
Hoosiers. Yeah.
Big Homer,
Yeah.
right?
No,
IU guy.
Anthony Pizzo, who wrote the movie, right, was involved in it. He's a Bloomington guy. His dad was a pathologist in Bloomington. I knew his younger brother, but I didn't know Anthony well. But anyway, yeah, Hoosiers. It's so classic. Yeah.
You weren't in Breaking Away, were you?
What? I'm sorry. What was that?
You weren't in Breaking Away, right?
No, but Breaking Away was filmed when I was a freshman at IU.
Okay.
And we were in the fraternity. We were in pledge training, and we had to go clean up the stadium after they filmed the final race at the old Memorial Stadium that was there at campus by the library. Yeah,
Those were the cutters. They were cyclists.
the Cutters, right? The Cutters. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
All right. Favorite athlete to watch?
Oh boy, I don't know that I have a favorite athlete to watch. That's kind of a cop out, but I really don't think I do. I don't think I could pick just one.
Is there a favorite sport you like to watch?
Favorite sport to watch? Really, again, I'd split it. It's either football or basketball, and it kind of depends on which one's on or
Sure.
which one I got a ticket to go watch. Yeah.
One or two favorite books? You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry I cut out there after.
One or two favorite books?
Well, uh, man, I'm not very good at this stuff. I would say there was a book that I read called The Nightingale.
Okay.
You ever read it?
No, but I'm writing it down. My wife and I are readers, so.
It's a World War II story.
Oh boy, she'll love that.
Fiction,
Okay,
based
historical
on
fiction.
occupation of France during the early 40s and how it affected a family and how the two daughters dealt with it differently, but both dealt with it. Phenomenal. And then the other book that I really enjoyed that was it was called A Gentleman in Moscow. They just came out with they're coming out with a miniseries on Paramount Plus, I think.
I'm writing it down.
A Gentleman in Moscow.
Awesome. In any book or movie or story, do you have a favorite like hero and villain?
Not really. You know, my one youngest daughter watched all the Marvel films early on and stuff like that.
Sure.
Kind of enjoyed Captain America, but
Yeah.
not like I've got a Captain America T-shirt or something. You know? Yeah.
Sure.
So and then villain, I'm not really sure. I always liked Gene Hackman, so whenever he played a villain, I guess I would like whatever villain he was playing. Yeah. Yeah.
I like his villain in Unforgiven, that Clint Eastwood Western, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pretty good one. For lifting, you have a favorite lift?
This is going to sound kind of weird, but to be honest, if I could do one thing, I'll do push-ups.
Okay.
It's not really a lift, but it is.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But I'll do push-ups. That would be my favorite. Yeah.
If you started all over and you had 10 million and you don't have any of that, medical school debt, what would you do?
Do I have to work?
No. If you had 10 million, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. I one of two things. I think I would either, well, you're looking for an answer. I would probably teach history,
Okay.
and then maybe be some form of some low level assistant coach at maybe the high school level.
What sport?
Football or
What
basketball.
sport?
Football or
Okay.
basketball. And not a significant, but one of those guys that's just kind of around to help. Maybe notices one thing a week that can help. But really there, I think I'd probably teach. People have asked me before, what would you do if you couldn't go to medical school? I think I probably would have gone to be a teacher, a history teacher and coach.
Gotcha. Any
I like
favorite?
it.
What
Any
about
favorite?
you?
What?
What
What about me?
you? What would you do?
If I had all the money and I didn't have to do anything, I'm only 49, so I'd probably still be in the Midwest and see my kids that are playing sports and they're in college and such. But if I can be anywhere, I would have a cabin in the woods where there's a mountain and water where I could go fishing pretty consistently, and then be like some national park dork that leads people around doing dorky stuff in Mammoth Cave or Great Smoky Mountains. I'd be one of those outdoor fishing dorks. If I were younger and I had the knowledge and the wherewithal, it's not a glamorous life like working, cattle or work on things like that. But you want to be one of those cowboys in the West that's pretty cool with a gun, right? And you can like on Tombstone or Yellowstone and be one of those badass dudes and a cowboy. That I think I'd be it's kind of quiet out there, and I'm outside all the time, and just you can still be intelligent and use your brain, but you're more physical with your body and your hands. So I like that. I like that.
Lucas, you get an answer right.
Yeah. What I would do is it's very similar to Jim. Actually, me and my girlfriend Caitlin have talked about. We would definitely move out to Montana somewhere. Definitely a cabin. Very similar to Jim. I know I'm not trying to copy, but definitely get like a cow, some chickens, garden kind of stuff, kind of out where we can kind of do our own thing and kind of be sustainable on our own. I would of course have a garage gym or probably a garage warehouse gym kind of.
For sure.
And then on top of that, I would definitely go find a place to continue line dancing because that's kind of my kick right now. So I would that's what I'd be doing right now if I had 10 million for sure.
If I were younger and I haven't made this impact with dealing with people and getting them healthier, that would still be an unmet need that I'd have to fix that and address that first. But if I'm in my 50s and 60s, then I'm like, okay, well, time for me to do something different. How about a favorite? Last one is a favorite quote that you might have, Doc.
I lost you there for a second. Looks like it reconnected.
Any favorite quotes you might have?
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of I think it's probably a blessing. And I think it's just awesome. It's for life is short. We do not have much time to travel the journey we're on with others. So be quick to love and make haste to gladden the hearts of those who journey with us.
Yes, amen. I love that. That's great. Life is short, so don't always be worried about where you're going 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Be present now. Be thankful for those relationships because that's really what matters. No one's, there's no U-Haul on the way to the cemetery hauling all your stuff. So you're taking it with you. You're taking it with you.
Yep.
Right.
There's a famous quote about Rockefeller. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story. So John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, richest man, and they had his estate press conference or something, and one of the reporters asked the attorney who was talking, how much did Mr. Rockefeller leave? And the attorney says, Mr. Rockefeller left all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, he left it all.
You're not taking anything with you. Yeah.
That's right. Yep. Doc, Tom, thanks so much for being on. I could tell you, anyone that's listening, that there's a few times in my life where with different companies and different groups and organizations where I'm thinking, man, those people that's what an elite level athlete, or that's what an elite level organization looks like. And I truly believe that Tom, the staff that you have and the way you conduct your business, your level of professionalism and the product and service you guys put out is an elite level product. And we are, blessed to have worked with you and very thankful and grateful for it, and very grateful for you taking the time to be on today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
And then looking forward to having you in June when we host the Athlete Builder Summit. So we'll get back to you with that. But real quick, last one, where can we find you?
I mean, where do I work?
Yeah, so just again, you work at
work at Forte Sports Medicine Orthopedics. So our main locations, North Side Indy, 106th and Illinois Street. They're just off 31. And then we've got a Greenwood location. We've got some other spots, but those are the two main spots.
Awesome. And for those that want to get a hold of us, they can get a hold of us at info@athlete-builder.com. Be on the lookout for Dr. Tom in a few weeks. And again, thanks a lot, Tom. We'll talk to you.
Thank you.